Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. The late morning light filtered through the tall windows of crimson lights, casting a warm glow over the worn wood floors and mismatched chairs that had borne witness to decades of Genoa city drama. The comforting aroma of espresso and cinnamon briefly disguised the tension humming beneath the surface. At a small table near the patio doors, Daniel Romalotti Jr. adjusted the strap of his guitar and strummed a few quiet chords. The melody was soft, almost uncertain, like he was still deciding whether he meant to play for the room or just for himself. Across from him sat Tessa Porter, her fingers wrapped around a mug she hadn't touched in several minutes. She watched Daniel with the faintest smile, but her eyes carried the same heaviness that had settled over much of Genoa City. When Daniel finished the tune, he looked up. Still rusty, he admitted. "You're not," Tessa said gently, "you're just distracted." Daniel huffed a short laugh. "That obvious." Tessa leaned back in her chair. "It's written all over you, family." Daniel nodded. "When isn't it?" That opened the door neither of them had to force. Tessa exhaled slowly. "Mariah and I, we're trying, we really are, but when trust gets shaken, even a little, it doesn't just snap back into place." The mention of Mariah Copeland brought a familiar crease to Daniel's brow. "You love her." "More than anything," Tessa replied without hesitation, "but loving someone doesn't mean it's easy, and when the past keeps knocking, sometimes it feels like it never really leaves." Daniel nodded. He understood that better than most. "My mom doesn't knock," he muttered. "She barges in." The name didn't need to be spoken, but it hung there anyway. Phyllis Summers. Tessa gave him a sympathetic look. "You two were doing better." "We were pretending to," Daniel corrected. "There's a difference." He stared down at the guitar strings, absently plucking one. "Every time I try to build something steady, something that's actually mine, she finds a way to turn it into her crusade." Tessa studied him carefully. "And this time?" Daniel hesitated. "This time I'm not letting her." He didn't elaborate, but there was resolve in his voice that hadn't been there before. Outside on the patio, a shadow paused just beyond the doorway, though neither Daniel nor Tessa noticed. Across town, the Newman ranch stood as imposing and immaculate as ever. Inside, the air was thick with unspoken questions. Nikki Newman stood in the living room, arms folded tightly, eyes locked on the man who had just walked through the door as though nothing were amiss. Victor Newman removed his coat with unhurried precision. "You're finally home," Nikki said evenly, too evenly. Victor met her gaze, unreadable. "I told you I would be." "You told me you had business," she countered. "You didn't tell me where or why or how long." Victor's jaw tightened just slightly. "It was handled." "That's not an answer." Nikki stepped closer, her voice lowering. "You disappeared, Victor. No details, no reassurance. Do you have any idea what that does to this family?" Victor reached for her hands, but she didn't immediately accept the gesture. "My love," he said calmly, "everything I do is for this family." "Then trust me enough to tell me what you did." A flicker of steel entered his eyes. "Some matters require discretion." "Discretion," Nikki repeated, incredulous, "or secrecy?" Victor didn't respond. The silence between them was heavy, not unfamiliar, but dangerous all the same. "You were out of town," Nikki pressed, "and Lily Winters just happens to be missing, along with her twins. You don't see how that looks." Victor's expression didn't change, but something sharpened behind it. "Lily made her own choices," he said coolly. "That's not what I asked." Victor moved toward the fireplace, staring into the flames as though the conversation bored him. "I will not justify myself for protecting my family's interests." Nikki's heart sank. That tone meant he was shutting her out. "You're playing a dangerous game," she warned softly. Victor turned back to her. "I always win dangerous games." But Nikki wasn't reassured. Meanwhile, in a sleek office at Newman Enterprises, Victoria Newman stood near the window, watching the city below. Behind her, Nate Hastings studied her reflection in the glass. "You've been quiet all morning," he observed. Victoria turned, offering a small smile. "I'm thinking about everything." Nate stepped closer. "Does everything include Lily?" The name lingered between them. Victoria's composure wavered just slightly. "Lily made a choice, Nate." To vanish, he challenged, with no explanation, no goodbye to her children. Victoria's gaze flickered. You don't know that. Nate narrowed his eyes. What aren't you telling me? She crossed her arms, a defensive gesture she tried to mask as casual. I'm telling you that sometimes people need space. And sometimes people are pushed. His words landed harder than he intended. Victoria softened her tone. You think my father had something to do with this? I think your father always has something to do with something. Despite herself, she smiled faintly. Nate stepped closer, his voice gentler. I care about you, Victoria, but I can't ignore what's happening around us. Lily wouldn't just abandon her life. Victoria's heart pounded. She knew more than she could admit about Victor's maneuvering, about the pressure placed on Lily, about the so-called opportunity that had forced her into silence. If she spoke, she'd betray her father. If she stayed quiet, she risked losing Nate's trust. She reached out, brushing her fingers against his sleeve. Trust me, she whispered. Nate searched her eyes. I want to. The space between them narrowed, emotional and physical, but tension coiled beneath the warmth. Victoria knew she was playing with fire. Back at Crimson Lights, the patio door swung open. Phyllis Summers stepped through like a storm breaking. Her eyes landed immediately on Daniel's. Of course, she said sharply, you're here. Daniel stiffened but didn't rise. Tessa sensed the shift and quietly gathered her things. I'll give you two some space. Please, Phyllis said with brittle sweetness, don't leave on my account. Tessa didn't respond. She slipped inside, though she didn't go far. Phyllis dropped into the chair across from Daniel without invitation. I hear you've been busy. Daniel didn't feign confusion. If this is about boundaries. It's about Harrison, she snapped. It's about Lucy. It's about you deciding I'm unfit to breathe the same air as my grandchildren. Her voice cracked on the last word, but her fury remained intact. You made this happen, Daniel said quietly, not me. Phyllis leaned forward. I have fought for this family my entire life. And bulldozed it in the process, Daniel shot back. A few nearby patrons glanced over. Phyllis lowered her voice, though it trembled. You would really cut me off from Lucy. If that's what it takes to protect her from chaos, yes. The words hung there. Phyllis blinked as if struck. You don't mean that. I do. Her face hardened, hurt morphing into rage. After everything I've done for you. Daniel stood now. This isn't about what you've done, it's about what you keep doing. Phyllis rose too. You're making a mistake. Maybe, he admitted, but it's mine to make. For a moment, the only sound was the wind brushing the patio umbrellas. Phyllis's voice dropped to a vow. You will regret this, and I will never forgive you. Daniel didn't waver. I'm prepared to live with that. She stared at him, searching for weakness, for hesitation. She found none. With a sharp turn, Phyllis stormed inside. Daniel sank back into his chair, breath unsteady but resolve intact. And somewhere across town, forces far more dangerous than family arguments were already in motion. The Newman ranch was quieter that evening, but the tension hadn't eased. Nikki stood alone near the grand staircase, replaying Victor's evasive answers in her mind. She knew her husband. She knew when he was protecting the family. And she knew when he was protecting himself. Victor entered from his study. You're still troubled. Shouldn't I be? He approached her slowly. You're imagining threats where there are none. Lily's children are frightened, Nikki said firmly. People are whispering, and you expect me to believe this is coincidence. Victor's eyes darkened. Lily aligned herself with interests that jeopardized this family. I neutralized the threat. By doing what? Silence. Nikki inhaled sharply. If you've hurt her. I haven't, he cut in, but I will not apologize for securing our position. Nikki shook her head. You think power justifies everything? It ensures survival. At what cost? He didn't answer. At Newman Enterprises, Victoria sat alone after Nate had left. Her phone buzzed. A message from Victor. Stay focused, say nothing. Her pulse quickened. Moments later, Nate returned unexpectedly, knocking once before stepping inside. "I forgot my phone," he said, but his eyes told her he'd come back for something else. He studied her face. "Victoria, if there's something I need to know." She stood, moving toward him. "There is." The lie felt heavier this time. Nate searched her expression. "Lily deserves transparency." "And so do you," she whispered, though she wasn't sure whether she meant it as a promise or an apology. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. The closeness felt real, warm. "Dangerous. If I find out you're protecting something that could hurt people," he said quietly, "I don't know where that leaves us." Her heart twisted. She didn't know either. Back at Crimson Lights, Phyllis stood alone by the counter long after Daniel had gone. Her fury had cooled into something sharper. Determination. "You want to push me out," she muttered to herself. "Fine." But Phyllis Summers didn't disappear. She retaliated. As night settled over Genoa City, alliances tightened and fractures widened. Daniel believed he had taken control of his future. Nate believed honesty would prevail. Nikki believed her husband was hiding something explosive. And Victoria stood at the center of it all, balancing loyalty against love, silence against truth. In Genoa City, secrets never stayed buried for long. And when they surfaced, they never did so quietly. The risk Victoria was taking would soon demand a price. Whether she paid it with her father's trust or Nate's heart remained to be seen.